Senator, nice to see you.
Glad to be with you.
Did you know you had a little crowd back behind you?
Well, this is CPAC. We love coming to CPAC. All the young kids and the energy. It's great to be here.
Well, I see that they certainly have they have their signs. I stand with Rand.
Oh, that's great. That's good.
You know, I also talked to your wife. She said she's going to vote, and she told me she's going to vote for the cutest guy.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that, but I have been lobbying her for her vote, so we'll see.
All right. Well, I hope she does at least vote for you. All right. Your message is essentially, if I'm correct, one of liberty. Is that correct? Is that what your message here is?
Yeah, my passion is the Bill of Rights, and that the Bill of Rights applies to everyone, and it sounds like, well, who wouldn't believe that? But there have been times in our history when we didn't apply the Bill of Rights very well to everyone. We need to remember that. We also need to remember that with current law. Currently, the law says that an American citizen can be detained without a trial. I find that just really completely and utterly unacceptable, and that's one of the things I'll tell, and it's a message I want the president to listen to.
All right, let me ask you a question about drones killing Americans overseas. Your thought?
There'll be some message of the discussion of drones. I think that it's dangerous not to have due process for American citizens. I'm not against using drones. I'm not against them as a military weapon. If we can save our soldiers' lives by using them, by all means, let's use drones in the military. But I have some questions about killing non-combatants, and I also have some questions particularly about killing Americans who might be on vacation somewhere. So, I've asked this question of the president repeatedly. Is there some kind of process? Do we not get our day in court? And I think it's very important that we do, and I'll continue to argue for that.
Have you ever actually sat down in the conversation with the president on this?
I had lunch about a week ago with Eric Holder, and we had a pretty extensive discussion about this, about due process, but also about second chance. I believe in a second chance. Kids that make mistake with drugs, who are given a jail sentence or given time in jail, I think they deserve a second chance. I think they deserve to get their rights back, the right to vote back. So that's actually someplace where I have in common, and you'll find that I'm not someone, well, I do criticize the president. I don't do it always just simply for partisan purposes. I do it when I disagree with him. But when I agree with the president or with Eric Holder, I'm not embarrassed to say, even at CPAC, that I do agree with allowing nonviolent felons many years after their sentence to be able to vote and enter society again.
All right, that's the big picture. In terms of 2014, 2016, do you think that the independent voters, which are the ones that I think that both parties would love to have, are interested in sort of the big picture, or is it something like jobs? I mean, is it more like, putting food on the table at home?
I think jobs are important, but I think if you ask the independent voter that is now trending heavily towards Republicans, it's that they liked their doctor and they want to keep them, and so they're insulted that the president gave us this grand takeover of medicine and said, if you like your doctor, you can keep them. But it turns out it's not true. So people have lost trust with the president. His numbers are plummeting because people want government to be honest. They also don't want a government that goes after political opponents. So the IRS scandal, the president using the full force of government to target his enemies, the Tea Party, many of whom will be here today, we're offended by that. And part of what I'll say today is no more. President, you can't use the government to abuse the citizenry.
Well, the president says that the Republicans are fighting him every step of the way, all the votes in repeal in the House. I realize you're in the Senate, and they're not trying to help fix it. And that, in essence, the Republicans are part of the problem on this. Disagree with the president on that?
There hasn't been one bill put forward to fix anything with Obamacare. Everything the Democrats have said from the beginning of Obamacare till now is our way or the highway. The president is unwilling to compromise on the debt ceiling, unwilling to compromise on Obamacare. The government was shut down, and we asked to delay the individual mandate. What was his response? Absolutely no, I will not negotiate with Republicans. So what did he do? A month after the shutdown, he delayed the individual mandate. So he has shown his intransigence. Many of us have said we will work, even though I hate Obamacare, I will vote for things to make it less bad. They haven't brought anything up. I don't think they will.
Is there any way for you to speak to the president? Does everything have to go through Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid in terms of the Senate communicating with the White House?
I had a conversation about 2 months ago. It was not just me, but some other Republican senators at the White House. And I said, why don't we lower the tax on corporate money that's overseas, let it come home at 5%. Currently, if you make profit overseas, it has to come home at 35%. And I said, let's put that into roads and bridges. That's a win for everybody. Republicans lower a tax rate, actually brings in revenue, and we build some bridges and roads. And he said, yeah, that is a good idea. And I said, why don't we do it? And he said, well, the CBO will score it as a loss of revenue. I said, We break every other rule in Washington. Why don't we tell the CBO to take a hike and do something good for the economy? Let's lower this tax. So I have been trying to get Democrats on board with that. Let's do that one bill and show that we can do something together. So I am willing to work with Harry Reid, but they've got to just get started. Let us vote on something.
How much of politics in Washington is about winning, and how much is about solving problems?
For some, it is about winning. I try to take a different approach. I'm a physician. I see a problem, want to solve it. And I really do see things completely regardless of who holds the presidency, Republican or Democrat. When I stood to filibuster the drones or the potential droning of an American citizen, I said I would have done the same if it was a Republican president, and I think people believe me. The party doesn't make a difference. It's about power. What the president is doing now to amend Obamacare without legislative authority is absolutely wrong. But if it were a Republican president doing it, I'd be just as critical.
Is there anything that I've heard some Republicans say that the president has abused his power, that he has essentially changed Obamacare? He's legislating, he's the executive branch of government. Is there anything the Republicans plan to do in terms of trying to put a check on that?
He needs to be sued. He needs to be taken to the Supreme Court. We took him to the Supreme Court on him saying we're in recess and he's just going to appoint people willy-nilly with no restraint by the Senate, and he lost. The Supreme Court's heard him. We haven't heard the final ruling, but the appellate court ruled against him and rebuked him. I think if we can get Obamacare or his illegal amending of Obamacare to the Supreme Court, I think he'll lose. I'm suing him over the NSA, and I'll mention that when I get out there in a few minutes. When I discovered that the NSA spied on and was collecting every American citizen's records, I took a stand. I sued the president. One warrant shouldn't apply to everybody's phone records. It's not what the Fourth Amendment meant. It's not what James Otis argued against or John Adams argued against. We have to stop him, and that means taking him into court. I'm not afraid to challenge the president, and we've got him in federal court in Washington right now. I hope we'll make it all the way to the Supreme Court.
You know, on the Fourth Amendment, it's almost as though people don't read the Fourth Amendment. But you can get all these records. You just have to follow the rules. You're talking about a generalized warrant, where it's just sort of a dragnet.
The warrant that was revealed by Snowden is a warrant to Verizon, and it says we want all of your records of all of your customers. Millions of records, millions of customers. The Fourth Amendment would say we want Greta Van Sustern's records because we suspect her of a crime. It has to have your name on it, has to have what you're accused of, it has to have what they want to get, and they have to have asked a judge and proved to a judge, or at least convinced a judge, that there's probable cause that you are associated with this crime. Those are steps to protect us from an overbearing government. We're not following that, and I think it's a huge mistake, and I feel strongly it's the only time I've ever sued the president is over this, so I feel very strongly about it.
Why do you think Governor Romney lost in 2012? Because the Republicans are still saying essentially the same things, and I guess that's sort of, it's sort of a look ahead.
We need a bigger party. You have to excite your base, so all of your base has to show up. All of CPAC and more has to show up, but then you need a bigger base. So I've been saying all along we're an increasingly diverse country till we have more African Americans coming our way, Hispanic voters, Asian American voters, Jewish American voters. We need a more diverse party.
Why aren't they flocking to the Republican Party if the Republican Party has such great ideas for them?
They will. They haven't heard my speech yet. I haven't gotten started. So,
but let me go back to why Governor Romney lost then. Why did Governor Romney lose?
I think the Republican Party in general, and this isn't the fault of one person, hasn't done enough to take their message to people. So I went to Detroit a month and a half ago and said to Detroit, I know you're suffering up here. We have a plan for you. Economic freedom zones. We're going to bring you such a dramatic reduction in your taxes that it will leave $1 billion in Detroit and help you resurrect Detroit, help you bring Detroit out of the ashes. No Republican's been bringing that to Detroit. Neither has any Democrat. So I think the population of Detroit, which voted 97% Democrat, is up for grabs. Maybe not all 97%, but if we begin to get 10, 20, 25% of the Detroit vote, all of a sudden Michigan's a Republican state, Pennsylvania's a Republican state. But it won't be just by expanding what our rump base is. It's got to be reaching out to new people, and I'm going to try.
What would you do about Putin in Ukraine?
We have to tell him that his behavior is unacceptable. He needs to be isolated, and if he's going to act like a rogue nation, he will be isolated. I don't believe that involves a military option, and I think that most of the party has come to my way of thinking on this, that there really isn't a military option for us there. But that doesn't mean that we don't react and that we don't let Putin know in clear and uncertain terms that what he's done is unacceptable. It breaches his treaty obligations. The Budapest Memorandum says that he wouldn't violate the integrity of Ukraine. I think also he does it at his own peril. The stock market in Russia has fallen precipitously in the last week. 80% of Russia's oil goes across Ukraine. If he tries to further occupy Ukraine, my prediction is Ukraine will become Syria. If Ukraine becomes Syria, it'll be a disaster for Russia, and he better think twice about it, because one Ukrainian teenager with $200 worth of explosive could disrupt his pipelines. So they're not going to submit to the will of Russia. They won't submit to subjugation. And so I think this hand is not yet over.
I think he's just going to say, so what?
We'll see, but I think he does it at his own peril. And Russia is very dependent on external trade. One thing I would do immediately if I were President Obama would be that I would immediately legalize the export of natural gas. I would expedite and do everything I can to begin the export of natural gas to Europe. I would compete with Putin. I would bring the price down to make it unprofitable for Putin to sell his oil. And then if he wants to play games or monkey around with the pipeline, or the pipeline gets exploded by terrorists, then I say, look, we'll supply the oil and gas for Europe.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you.